Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I'm here today with none other than the Loremaster himself, Mr. James Lammin. Good evening.
Good evening, Simon. How are you?
I'm right, thanks. Yeah, good to have you on the channel.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, exciting.
Been sort of coming to your events now for on and off for a few years, and it's like, we get the chance to catch up now and then, but good to have more of a long form conversation.
Bit of Saturday night dinner and then to a pub maybe, but there's always about 100 million of us in those scenarios. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
no,
after you
lovely.
and after you played 3 games of Warhammer on a Saturday, my mind's like, that's how it is. So, I guess I've got a bunch of questions here for you about Triple Crown Wargaming and about you personally. Perhaps a good place to start is, what is Triple Crown Wargaming and how did it originate?
Yeah. So
Easy question to start with.
easy question. Yeah. So I suppose it all started out as the Triple Crown Grand Tournament, basically. So that was about 2015. I'd been to a lot of events. I was playing a lot of events, and we had just had Wayland Games just opened a big gaming centre, not very far from where I was living at the time, and I knew the guy that was kind of in charge of that at the time, and he was saying, "Oh, you go to lots of events, you could probably run one, like we could do it together." So that was pretty cool, and we'd worked together sort of in another job years before, and we'd done an event there. Um, which was called Triple Crown. So we thought, oh, we'll bring that back, because the idea originally was that it would be kind of, you'd be scored for your gaming, but you'd also be scored for your painting and for your sportsmanship.
Right.
So that was your triple of Triple Crown, if you like. It was no one element should be enough, if you like, to win it outright. You'd need all of them. So we sort of put the first one on in 2015 with a guy called Dan. Yeah, wild, really successful, surprisingly so for a first event. But I think it was a really exciting time in terms of everyone thought a new edition of the game was about to drop. There was all
Okay.
the end time supplements had been pouring out, and I
Yeah.
think there was a lot of excitement around at that point. And then obviously, it went the other way.
The rest is history. Yeah.
So I sort of at the time said, well, look, I really enjoyed running it. It was really successful. So I think I'm going to like try and keep running these. I'm going to run a Triple Crown too. And I said to everyone at the event, look, as long as people buy tickets and we can afford to run it, we'll run it. And that sort of poodled on really. And the numbers weren't huge. Like there's no point in pretending they were. They weren't huge numbers, maybe 20, 25 players for the next couple. And then I got involved with a Facebook group called Champions Destiny, which I certainly, if you're in the UK, we talk about it on the channel all the time as well. And effectively, that was a really big network of people playing Warhammer in the UK. And so I started to advertise the events on there, and it started to pick up in numbers again. So that was really cool. And then lockdown came along, and we all got pandemicked. And by this point, I kind of obviously I had like a group of friends that were playing Warhammer with regularly, and those guys would help me with the events, because once you're back up to kind of 40 odd players, you need, if you want it to run smoothly, if you want it to kind of be an experience for people coming, I think you need help
Yeah.
personally,
Yeah.
because I can't be everywhere.
Yeah.
So I had sort of Scott and Max and my brother used to help out a bit, and we kind of had this thing going. And just in that kind of lockdown time, we started chatting about, well, what if we did like a channel, like a video channel where we did
Yeah.
videos for Warhammer, like we run events and we go and play. But I think that having that time inside, lots of people channeled what they felt were like creative endeavors. I painted a lot of figures. I don't know about yourself, but that was kind of a creative outlet for us, all in lots of different locations, not seeing your friends for months. We would ring up and chat, or chat
Yeah.
on, Facebook Messenger or whatever, about what we were planning. And we sort of put together this idea of having a channel. And then it kind of was like a weird merger, really, because I was like, well, we could call it Triple Crown Wargaming. We could kind of make it that side. And it was kind of Scott and Max's idea of this channel with kind of my existing title, if you like, of an event. And I was like, well, we might as well marry the whole thing together, and then we can run events, link it directly to the channel. And it kind of just happened, really.
Okay. So how long was it just running events before you got the idea of doing the online side of it?
It would have been about 5 years.
Okay.
So we were about to run Triple Crown 6 when lockdown came, and obviously we had to cancel that. And then and then that was kind of the genesis of going, well, when we come back, am I gonna come back and run events after this? Yeah, I think I am. And then we kind of got into this idea. So it really was a perfect storm of lots of minds and ideas that turned it into a channel. And then you get all those early videos where we're in the garden because you couldn't meet inside, so we had to improvise. But
true. The strange times of lockdown.
But it's been a journey. It's been like 2.5 years since we kicked the channel off, and a little bit longer than that, obviously, since we started putting it together, because we did want to kind of launch with some content in the bag. We didn't want to kind of go, oh, we're starting a channel and here's a video. We wanted to have half a dozen videos and a bit of a different different types of video and stuff like that. So
of course, and obviously if you're asking for money, you're committing to a certain amount of content, aren't you? And so it's like, you've got to make sure you hit your targets in a way.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think certainly a big driver for me, and I'm really fortunate in that I work with guys on this project that really share the same kind of values and the same drivers. You've been to our events, and I'm not saying they're perfect by any stretch, but I do think we try really hard to make that feel like you got something you paid for. I say to people a lot, I treat it quite professionally. Like I treat it like I'm at work almost.
Yeah.
And you're not, because you are having a laugh and you might have a beer and whatever you're going to do. But I think like because people have given you their money, for me that's really important, that they feel like they got value for money. And I know a lot of the people that come to our events, to an extent, I imagine yourself in a similar position. You don't get to go away every weekend of the year, every twice a month. You've got lives, you've got wives, children, important jobs. So I think if you decide you're going to have one of your few weekends off and spend your hard kind of saved cash to come to an event, that should be a proper experience. You should go home thinking, I had a great time.
Yeah. No, you're from personal experience, your events are really well run, and it's professionally done. I can just turn up with my army. So there's someone there to tell me where to go. There's my opponent. It runs smoothly. There's lunch there waiting for me, and I'm having a good time. So
that's really lovely to hear, and it's nice because that's the idea, if you like, but best laid plans and all of those sentences. But we wanted the channel to feel that way, so we wanted it to feel like when we say, we'll live stream 5 games from an event this weekend, or we will give you this video on this Sunday coming. We were really keen that it had to do that. It had to deliver that for people because and I think as well, like in the community that we're working in, the sphere we're working in, if you like ultimately there's not a lot of us, right?
No.
Like everyone does really know everyone. Like it's very rare that I go to an event and see a name on the list that I don't know or haven't met, or because I've been to a few events and we're not a huge community, So I think that's important, that we kind of take care of each other a little bit. I know that's really weird, like Jerry Springer style, but I think it's important that we kind of we look out for each other in that way.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've been so impressed in terms of, like you say, we see the same faces a lot, and it's kind of like I've got these friends like who live in the north of England or whatever, and I'll see them twice a year, and I'll have a beer with them and catch up and talk about Warhammer all night, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and he's crazy to me. Particularly with the channel, like it's crazy to me when I meet people and they're like, "Oh, I love this and I love that, and how's this project you're doing coming?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, I've known you like 3 minutes. You know all this stuff. It's really cool." Yeah, great.
And I've actually started to notice that myself a little bit. Sorry to interrupt you there. I've just started to notice that myself, running a YouTube channel. In that I'll go to the event, and people will know me. I don't know them, and they'll know me, and they'll know what army I play and stuff. And it's like, oh, great, I've got a bit of you know, localized fame in a sense that people know
Yeah,
me.
and it's really lovely, and I think that's the thing that sticks out for me a lot of the time is that people just generally really nice to me. That's really odd, you like meet people and they kind of start in that way, and I think that's something that's really great about the community at large in kind of the sort of current fantasy community, if you like. And I bang that drum a lot, but I genuinely mean it when I say that I'm like grateful that people subscribe and I'm grateful that they come to our events, because that makes it good for me. Like I actually really like running an event as much as I
Yeah.
love playing in them. I like running an event and I like being an idiot on a video and saying stupid things and have people use my really ridiculous catchphrases against me when I'm playing at events against them and stuff. I just think it's really funny. Like to me, like what
Yeah.
I think sometimes, right, we forget that what we're actually doing as grown adults is we're playing with toy soldiers about that big, and like
Yeah.
they're bits of plastic that we painted, and I'm guilty of taking it seriously. I'm not saying I'm not, but I think like you've got to have fun, right? It's got to be fun too. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
and that's a big part of it for me.
So how was your
But
how
how
was
have
your
you
life?
found?
Sorry, mate. I
Sorry,
think
go on.
there's a slight delay, isn't it, on the audio, but it's fine. Yeah. I was going to ask what how has your life changed then since you started running the channel specifically? I mean, does it take up loads of your spare time?
It is pretty consuming. It's surprising, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
And
I
has that got easier or harder over time?
I think it's got a bit easier. I think we've got better at it, and I think that helps in a way because um what I really like, and we have to get you down for this. Like I really like the Take the Crown series and what it's done, because we've had quite a lot of people come on now, and they come on and they do a day with us, and they like sort of do some videos, and they're like, "This is really like a lot of time and a lot of work," and you're
Mm.
like, "Yeah, it is surprisingly so, if you know what I mean." But I think we're a bit better at kind of doing it in one take,
Yeah.
and it sounds really silly, but and you might have experienced this yourself. Like you can all read your army list, right? But when you put a camera on your face and then say, "What are you taking in your game today, Simon?"
Yeah.
It becomes really hard sometimes
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
to just do it. So, um, yeah, I mean, I'd say we spend probably one full day a week together as a team,
Okay.
which we've all got pretty intense jobs. So it means that sort of we have that one day. Most weeks it's a Sunday, but sometimes it might be a Saturday. But that day is really chalked out for the channel. Will normally start about 9 in the morning and finish 5 o'clock in the afternoon
Wow.
most of the
Yeah.
time. Um, but then there's a part of that as well that is probably a thing with us as a team, is that like we are very much either didn't like that, or you know um it needs to be really good,
Yeah.
so we don't like to sort of scrimp or cut. We like you to see everything,
Yeah.
and that's no criticism of anyone else, but kind of I think part of the time consuming element is our style to an extent as well, where we like it to be a certain way, and so we sort of tie ourselves in knots.
Well,
But
what
yeah,
I
I
like
mean,
about your channel the most, and I don't watch all the videos, but um, obviously you've got a lot of knowledge about the game and you've got a lot of experience of playing it competitively, and therefore, people want to hear what you have to say in terms of like building army lists and doing tactics and stuff like that. Um, and also, so that gives you the competitive, element of the videos, and you have tactics videos and stuff. And I watch all of those. And then I think you've got the banter, which is good, which I know that may sound like a bit of a insignificant thing, but actually, I mean, you look around on YouTube, other people playing Warhammer Fantasy, and just having good interaction between the people playing it, having a few jokes here and there, just makes it that much more entertaining. I think it's good.
oh, that's really. I mean, again, to be honest, that is a huge part of what we go for. I mean, it is nice for us because we're actual mates, which I think
Yeah.
helps in a way. Um, it's not that we're kind of thrust together. Like we are friends, and so we do. I'm probably the worst for this. We do like to wind each other up when we're sort of in a game, or something's going wrong perhaps, or going right.
Yeah, yeah.
So but I think that's important, and yeah, certainly we do try and have sort of a set of videos, if you like, for everyone, where we'll have those tactics segments, or it might be like a breakdown of a codex or an army book or something like that. And then we kind of flip that to red blazers chatting rubbish over a Blood Bowl video. Like, this is just it's
I saw that. Yeah, that's good.
What do you want from
Yeah.
your content, if you like, and we do have quite, it is really strange sometimes how different like the kind of makeup can be at like a narrative style event versus a GT style event that we would run. And we see that on the channel. The guys that comment on videos like the Blood Bowl video aren't necessarily the guys that even watch the kind of competitive gaming videos or the tactics videos. It's just not for them. But again, I think it's that we try to cater for the community, if you like, and try to do a bit of something for everyone, because I think we're all that gamer at heart. Like, in a way, we're all, some days you just want to be silly, right? You just want to throw 3 bloodthirsters on the table because it's cool, not because it's good or bad, because it's fun,
Well, that's it. I mean, because 8th edition hasn't been supported for a long time, the people who do play it are really enthusiastic about it. They might have also been people who've been playing it for a long time, and therefore they want a bit more variation, a bit more fun to it, because standard games they've played lots of times. And so, you're providing something that people are looking for. Yeah.
No, we try. So thank you. I mean, to be fair, I don't think we're the only ones either. If I'm honest, I certainly look around at the stuff we see. Obviously, I watch your videos. I think they're great. And I sort of try and stick my head in when I get the time to look at other people's battle reports or content. Lots of people commenting on the old world right now is quite exciting. I'm in nerd mode there. Like, I'm in proper geek mode. I'm like, right, I'm ready. I just want to see some figures. I want to. I know there's going to be stuff that I love. I know there's probably going to be stuff that I think, I liked this better this way or whatever. But I'm just excited for saying, like you were saying, to be honest, Simon, I've done it a long time. This set of rules I've played for nearly 15 years or whatever it is now.
Well, I'll come to the old one in a bit, but just going back to like sort of, because essentially you're running an online business in a way. Obviously, you've got the event side of it as well. But like, I mean, when I look online, when I look on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, I see some people. There's lots of people who are finding some way to monetize their hobby in a way. Obviously, you got painters, you got professional painters who are doing commissions. You got people like yourselves doing battle reports. Perhaps they invest some money in a studio and do some exclusive content. I saw one guy the other day. I found his YouTube channel. He was actually selling lessons for how to improve your tactics at 40k, and I was like, "What? I didn't even realize."
I've seen some stuff like that in the past, and hats off to those guys. They're obviously very good at what they do, and
well, that's it. I mean,
turning that into something very different and unique.
Yeah, I mean, if you offered someone you said, okay, would you like to play Warhammer then talk about Warhammer full time as your job? A lot of people would jump at that. But also, I mean, do you get the sense that, like, if your hobby becomes your job, then your friends become your work colleagues, and then you can sort of lose some motivation there a bit.
Yeah. So I worked for Games Workshop. I've not made that a secret to sort of people when I'm at events and things. I worked for Games Workshop for quite a long time. I worked for them for the best part of 5 years on and off. Sort of about 4 years in one big lump, and then a little bit later for a bit more. And that was always one of the challenges with that job, is that there's great, you get to talk about Warhammer all day, and you get to get your figures out at work, like that's really cool. But ultimately, when you have a bad day at work, you come home. The thing that I do to chill out,
exactly,
have a look at a codex or an army book, come up with a new list, paint a figure, do something cool. You just don't want to look at it, and that's how I felt and that was a big part of me saying, well, actually, I think I'm not gonna do this job anymore, because when you're under stress and pressure at work, you kind of feel a disconnect in the thing that takes some of the stress and pressure out of your life, because that reminds you of what you're doing in the morning. So that, I think, definitely can be the case. And I don't think it would be a surprise for me to say there are definitely some weeks where we as a group, it might be me today, it might be Max tomorrow, go, I've got to
That's
get
funny
up.
because
I've got to get up 7:30 on Sunday. I've got to get down to the studio
yeah,
and do this video, which is Orcs and Goblins versus Tomb Kings or whatever, and that's definitely for me. I'm a gamer who likes to kind of take an army and I might play with them for 4 or 5 months and
yeah,
really develop my tactics and get sharp. And that's definitely been a shock with the channel where it's like next week you're using high elves and
yeah,
then
yeah,
the week after you're using Orcs and Goblins. I'm like, okay.
yeah.
So yeah.
I remember speaking to a man that we both know, Michael Duff,
Mm.
who of course is a professional painter, and he was saying how obviously because he paints all day, not only does he not he's not able to decide what he paints, and most of the time he has to paint Space Marines, but also he doesn't have the sort of time or the motivation to paint his own models as much because he's been painting all day and then he's not
Yeah.
going to paint in the evening again. So you kind of think, well, as much as I'd love to do Warhammer as a job, I want it as my hobby as well,
Yeah, and I totally agree with that,
Yeah.
and certainly we tend to, as a gaming group now, if I think about me and Scott, Max, my brother, we tend to, rather than being like, oh well, what are you doing for this event, or what's exciting you about painting at the moment, it'll kind of be like, what would you like to use in a video next month? Oh, I might, we haven't an ogres on for a while. Oh yeah, that'd be cool. You got anything you could do for them that'd be cool? Oh yeah, I have. I've got a second iron blast. I haven't done that. Oh yeah. So that kind of almost like it's still exciting and it's still fun, but it kind of like I finished a Dwarf Blood Bowl team this morning
As you do.
because we're putting them on, they're gonna be on a video next month. And so it's kind of like, well, what's my hobby dictated by this week? Well, I don't get me wrong, I picked them because I thought they're gorgeous models and I really wanted to paint them. But there's also that thing of going, well, that kind of the fact they're going to be on that video dictates that I will paint them now, if that makes sense. So
Sure, yeah, yeah.
there is a bit of that, but I think that again, that probably comes back to us in a way as well, where we'll be like, well, let's not use the same army list. Let's not, oh, we've had that army list on, or we've had that character on. Let's paint. I'm going to paint Orion. Well, I've not painted Orion. We get him on a battle report. Let's whack him on. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah, yeah.
there is that as
So
well.
is there a distinction then, like what's on your painting table right now? Is it like stuff for the channel and stuff for you, or is it all the same at the moment?
It's a bit all the same at the moment. I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of high elves on my painting station at the moment.
Sure.
I've really revisited that over the summer. They were my first Warhammer army, and they're not really my most successful gaming army, if I'm honest.
Okay.
Which is weird because I think they're one of the best armies in the game. But I think I just get into like you collect an army because you love it. Like, I love the background for high elves. They're just cool. Their models are just cool. And so I think what happens is even when I've got a really good list, I get to a point on the table and I'm like, I'll do this. And it's absolutely the wrong decision, right? But I'll do it because I'm like, that is cool. Like,
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
your thing? White lions down a hill in the flank. I don't care if turn 6, I might lose those victory points. And then all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, I lost that game and I was winning because
I was having too much fun. Like.
yeah, I don't have that
Yeah.
same. I don't have the same kind of urge, if you like, with say, obviously I suppose I'm quite well known for using vampires, and I don't have that same urge, and I love them, but I love them in a kind of more clinical way. I love them as a gaming army first, and as a kind of background army second, if you like. So I don't know, that has an effect, but I just thought my high elves don't really get a lot of love, and having like a bit of a break the last few weeks, I was like, I could get some figures out. I could paint some stuff. I've got like loads of Islander Blood Sword Masters, for example, which I've had for however long ago that box came out, and I've just never painted because I had some metal ones that were already painted.
Okay. Yeah.
So if I want to use them, I use the ones I've got painted. So I kind of was like, well, actually, what can like 34-year-old James do with these models? Because the ones I'm using were painted by 15-year-old James. So let's look at what I can do to make that more. So I've just high elves. I've done done a dragon. What a shock! So I painted the dragon.
So high elves were your first Warhammer army. Was Warhammer your first Games Workshop game?
No. So I got some 40k stuff when I was about 10.
Okay.
Had a friend at school, the classic. He was getting some Chaos Space Marines. I was like, yeah, I'll get into it with these guys. Have got flying tanks. That seems really cool. So I'll have Space Elves, right?
Oh yeah.
And then, that, like that was maybe like 3 or 4 months, and I was probably a bit young for it, if I'm honest. Like I found the rules a bit hard to work out. Put it in a box. Didn't really think about it again.
Yeah.
And then Lord of the Rings came out. Great movies. Loved them. And then they did that magazine, the Agostini one, where you got like a figure every week when you bought the magazine. I don't know if you remember that bad boy.
I've heard of it. No, I never
Um,
got it. No.
might be showing my age now. But they did this magazine, and you got kind of a figure with every issue. And that kind of really tied something up for me, because you're really excited about that property anyway, because you're watching the movies, and I was the right sort of age, do you know what I mean? Like sort of 12, 13. It's just a perfect storm. And I've really got into Lord of the Rings. Still play it now, love it. I think it could be the best system Games Workshop ever produced, if I'm honest.
Really?
In
Oh,
terms of a gaming system, I think it's excellent.
yeah.
It really does only work on a small scale.
Hmm.
It just wouldn't transfer for Warhammer, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I really think as a skirmish system, I think it's excellent. And then lots of my friends, and you're in a Games Workshop a lot more, suddenly you're making new friends. They were playing 40k. So got back into 40k. And then, like I say, it wasn't until I was about 15 that I got into fantasy. And I think a big part of that at the time, and this is no like criticism of anyone, but I think that I had a perception that was a game for older people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for older kids, do you know what I mean? And like me at like 12 and 13, that like, no, Warhammer like fantasy was like the big boys game. That was not the game for me. And then I got into that sort of, as as our friendship group was like, we're a bit older, we want to try this. And it definitely was more complicated than kind of 40k and Lord of the Rings. And it felt like a natural extension. And then yeah, that was it really. I got high elves to start there, because who doesn't want dragons, right? That was
Yeah.
literally my motivation, was which armies have got dragons, right? These ones, they look like the coolest dragons, so I'm buying that army.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was
Well,
no
I
more
never
thought.
played Lord of the Rings, man. I mean, I'm actually a bit older than you. I mean, I actually read the Lord of the Rings book way before the films came out. But like, I mean, I love Lord of the Rings as well, and I've had, when I first got into fantasy, I had a love for like the Balrog from Lord of the Rings, and I just loved the Bloodthirster just straight away. And then, as you know, I ended up getting the new blood when I got back into Warhammer. I saw this new Bloodthirster model. I just thought this is the most amazing thing ever, and I wanted to build a whole army around that model. Just from
He's a
the
great figure, isn't
nostalgia
he?
of it. Oh, lovely model, yeah.
And there's something organic about that as well. I think like that is something that's so good about Warhammer Fantasy. I think is that it's got such a great range of almost like archetypal things. It's kind of like, if you like the idea of vampires, you can do that. If you like the idea of Egyptians and mummies, or
Yeah.
the Aztecs, or like people living underground, whatever your kind of jam is, if you like, there's something that, like you said, you love the Balrog. Awesome. You can find something that really captures the essence and kind of flavor of the Balrog.
Yeah.
In Warhammer. And I think, yeah, it doesn't shock me to hear you say that, because that was my experience of it as well. Was I think dudes on dragons are really cool. I want to do an army around a dragon. I'm
Exactly.
buying
Yeah.
dragons,
Yeah.
So
Pick what you like, and then do that, and then goes from there, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but yeah, long time now.
So what about competitive Warhammer then? I mean, have you always been a competitive player?
Um, I think that honestly, I like to win games.
Yeah.
I love a good game, but who doesn't like to win a game? You know what I mean? Like when you like, and that extends beyond Warhammer. If I'm playing Mario Kart, on the Switch, or if I'm playing Monopoly at Christmas with my family, obviously I want to win. So, I think I always had that like, inkling, if you like, but I didn't really get into going to lots of events until 8th edition fantasy started. And I think that was more than anything, that was just a time, money, you know, motive, method, and means, or whatever they call it. It was really the thing that happened then. I was in my early 20s. I drove. I had a job. I was earning good money. I didn't have, you know, I had a bit of disposable income. So suddenly, and I had friends at the time. I'd just started working at Games Workshop. I had friends that were doing it as well. So you had this perfect storm of being able to go, well, actually, let's go. And that was where that started. And obviously I wasn't very good because, well, you're not, you know what I mean? You know, in a way I wasn't going to be, because I hadn't really like played a lot at that level. But I do think when you go to quite a lot of events, it catches pretty fast. So I think within sort of 12 months or so, I was doing all right, you know. And
when are these Games Workshop events?
So I did Games Workshop events, and then we did a couple of those to start with. They were like my gateway events, if you like. And then I started going to independent events. So South Coast GT, Reading Warfare, Blood and Glory, other sort of independent events that sort of pop up and you go, oh yeah, I'll buy a ticket to that. Not to be disrespectful to anyone. Pompey Pillage, I think we did one year. There was, so yeah, it would just be, we had a little group chat and someone would stick in and go, oh, this one's here on this stage, fancy going? Oh yeah, go on then. So, and that was it really.
Cool. And because I was out of the hobby for a long time. I mean, I played 4th and 5th back in the day, and then I got back into 8th edition already after Games Workshop had stopped it. So I was never really playing the game competitively, going to events and stuff until, you know, after it stopped. So I mean, I would say that Warhammer isn't designed to be a competitive game, at least not first and foremost. In fact, I would go so far as to say no Games Workshop games are really designed initially as a competitive game. But I mean, do they?
No, I agree.
Yeah, but would they have a detailed comp pack for those?
So independent events would.
Yeah.
Games Workshop events wouldn't. They would just use out of the book, or if they were using, they might use a specific kind of supplement or event pack that sort of did stuff. But ultimately, it would really just be out of the box Warhammer.
Right. And what was that like then? Uncomped events run by Games Workshop. I mean,
do you know what? I think that in a weird way. So a couple of the guys went to an uncomped event recently. Max and Scott went, and I was planning on going, but I just had a problem at the last minute and got caught adulting. But we were sort of playing a few games on the run up, and I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot what it's like to play against. I think we just got so used to the fact that people don't take like -18 lists, you know, if I think about our comp system, and you play one, you think, wow. But I think the other thing that we forget is that the game was designed for a 100-point win margin.
Right.
So we always think about kind of, and I'm guilty of this, and I know lots of people are. We talk about like, well, they're not very good, this army. Why? Well, you know, because they just don't, they give away too many victory points. They don't get 20 nils. Well, actually, that's not the scoring in the main rulebook. The scoring is 100 points. So you can give away 1,900. If you kill 2,000 of mine, you've won. So I think it's different. I think there's a lot more kind of conserving. There's a lot more totaling up your points as you go, if you like. And you're off. I certainly think for me as a player, I would be really meticulous with my kind of crippling strikes. Identify your targets that I want to hit. I'll smash them really hard, and then would be like, right, now what am I going to do to block this off, or to stop this channel, or to use bait and flee to mean that I'm going to beat you by 500-600 points comfortably, and I haven't got to stress. And I think this is the thing that I think has been so good about the Derby deathmatch event we run, is that like, when you put 100-point brackets in, suddenly armies that people don't consider to be the powerhouse armies can be just as effective, because everyone can do, you know, everyone can choose to flee. Everyone can include some chaff. Everyone can get some points by hitting a big thing. And so suddenly you've got lists that maybe aren't conventionally considered to be really strong, doing the business, because it's a totally different set of tactics. So I really
Just
like
sort of doing the basics right becomes more important.
yeah, I think so. And I don't think that changes tons at 20-0. But I think that at 20-0, you've got to have a game plan on how you're going to get victory points. Like ultimately, getting up 300-400 is just not going to be enough to get near the top of the draw
Yeah.
at a 20-0 scoring event. So you just have to kind of accept that. And that does change the style, but it was a big change then going to independent events.
Yeah, yeah.
And then what I found was that I stopped going to Games Workshop's sort of more competitive events, if you like, and started just going for like the campaign and stuff, those sort of events, because I couldn't switch, if you know what I mean. Like, I mean, some armies you can take a 20-0 high elf army and you can 20-0 with that at a normal event, a Games Workshop event, and you can do the same at an independent event. But ultimately, like, I think it is a different style of playing, and different types of lists become more dangerous. In that scenario, that was my feelings on it, but I'm not sure everyone would agree with me on that. But I did a lot more independent tournaments after the first 12 months.
So you wrote the Triple Crown compact.
For my sins.
Sins. And but I hear now, like obviously it's not just used with other tournaments in the UK, but we got people in Sweden using it, and I think was it you that said me that there were people in the USA using it as well? Was it
It's a wildly, and you'll see me getting really uncomfortable. It's a wildly humbling experience that what's happened with that event pack. And I so I'd seen this version of this style of comp being used in the States about a decade or more ago. And they called it ladder comp, and it was this kind of like your units are worth pluses and minuses, and you get a score, and it's taken off at the end.
Sorry, did you say ladder?
Ladder is what
Ladder,
is what they were sort of calling it. So I'm not going to pretend like this was my Genesis genius, right? But it wasn't really being used in the UK, and I was like, okay, I quite like this idea because it's really simple. And what I saw it being used for was for 40k.
Okay.
So I was like, right, could I design ladder comp for fantasy? And so that was what we did for Triple Crown 1 for the first GT. We hashed out a pack, and it took us ages, but we sort of took this idea we'd seen being used in 40k and we applied it to fantasy. And it obviously wasn't perfect. It's never perfect, to be honest, and then from there we just tweaked it every year with what we saw maybe was a bit over the top, or a combo we'd missed, or whatever like that. And then as you play more and you get used to it more, it kind of happens. But I honestly think the entire success of it is just it's really easy to use. It's super accessible.
Exactly.
And I talked to Alan Bennison about this about 2 or 3 years ago, and he was like, I see it as a common language. He's like, if I'm meeting someone I've never played before, I send them that pack because I know they'll be able to like work out the score for their list in like 10 minutes. And I say to him, like, send me the score for your list and I'll make my match.
Yeah.
He's like, and that's a great experience for like 2 people that have never met. And because you can get a total understanding of the sort of game. There's nothing worse than you come in with your like fun, fluffy army of dwarves with no cannons and 120 warriors, and I rock up with 4 Frostheart Phoenixes and a Larry or whatever. You're like, this wasn't fun. So, and that I think was a really interesting insight because I'd never thought about it in that way. But yeah, it has taken a life of its own.
And how different is the current version of the compact to the original one?
Pretty massive, if I'm honest.
Okay.
Pretty massive. So the original comp used 50% Lords and Heroes because that was the standard at the time. Because that was it was written during the end times era when that was the standard. And obviously I abolished that after Triple Crown 2. I took it back to because I was like, you know what, the game isn't better for this, it's worse. So we went back to 25% Lords and Heroes, and actually that had a really positive impact in terms of what we saw from the feedback from people. But yeah, there was definitely stuff we missed the power on, and perhaps not having total experience of.
Can you give us an example of something that you changed and why you changed it?
That is a great question. Yeah, let me have a little.
Like high elves, for example.
Um, so oh, Dragon Princes, there you go. There's a good example. So they weren't comped the first year
Hmm.
at all. And actually, when Cardiff took our event pack and used it for their first one, they took the comp off them as well. And I remember saying to Chris, the reason they're comped is because we had a guy rock up to an event. I think it was Triple Crown 2, and he had 15 or 16 of them. He had a prince, an archmage in there, another noble, a BSB in there. They all had dragon armor on.
Yeah.
He had Crown of Command in there. He had Banner of the World Dragon in there. And every time the archmage casts a spell, they get a better ward save.
Yeah.
And no one could kill him. It was just unstoppable. And the block was like well over half his army. Everything he charged, he pretty much railroaded off to the man. And he didn't win the event. And that was solely because he played Dark Elves in the last game.
Yeah.
And the Dark Elves, he got Doom and Darkness on the Dragon Princes, and they failed the leadership check.
So
that was it. That's all it came down to. He failed the leadership check because his starting check was much lower, and he got run down. And that was the only reason that didn't want that year. And I just think it was something that he looked at and gone, well, no one's considered the fact that we can make this really killy with the characters, and it's almost impossible to get off the table. And it was really hard. Max used a version of it at London Legends, but it was a much kind of softened back version because of the fact that he would pay such a hefty comp tag to take the really hardcore version. So that was definitely one that caught us out.
You got to be careful, haven't you, when you're tinkering with the comp, because often, you know, when a new sort of meta changes, or when it's fashionable to bring hordes, or it's fashionable to bring big monsters or whatever, it kind of, you can sort of get really big wins and sort of smash everyone up the first time you do it because no one's expecting it. But then after a while, people do just adjust their list. They get used to it, and actually, if you just comp it straight away, you risk kind of unbalancing things. But actually, people just need to adjust to what people are bringing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I totally agree. And it is where I think we've got it in a good place now. And I always say I don't think it's perfect, but we do it once a year now. We base it on as much event data as we can get. So it is lovely that we've got kind of guys in Sweden using it, and we've got some guys in America, and it's really gone a bit mad, to be honest. We had some guys in Australia do an event with it, and some guys in Canada are running running the narrative events at the moment in Canada, which is really surreal. So, but I think the element there, where we do it once a year, and we try and be really analytical as well. So if we think about like this year, the second GT was cleaned up by an artillery heavy list, but I'm probably not going to go chasing artillery. The reason that was so successful is because this last sort of year or so, the meta shifted to take loads of big monsters from Monstrous Arcanum. And what Joby's army did was spotted the fact that lots of people were doing that and went, all right, well, I'll pay my comp for my cannons and my steam tanks, and I'll clean you up.
Yeah.
And he did.
I mean, I also did that at the same event, but didn't have the same success. But
probably because you didn't turn anyone's wizards into frogs. The amount of frogs that man gets out of that scroll is beyond a joke. But
that is good. Yeah, that is good.
But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you've had experience of coming to the events and playing through it. How have you found it as a system? You know, what would you identify
the simplicity of it's good. And I think, like you say, once a year is about right, because I mean, what they do with 40k, where they play a whole round of tournaments, they collect a bunch of data, and then they start nerfing stuff straight away. It just seems really reactive. And I mean, I don't play 40k. This is just what people are telling me, but it's like, that just feels like, you know, a new army list comes out, they do really well with it. Before people even got time to adjust, they're already sort of changing the stats and things like that. And that just seems crazy to me.
Do you know what? You say that, and I was playing a bit of 40k back in sort of 2018, 2019 when they started doing this, and it really put me off because I'm a slow painter, right? So if I'm going to do an army list and paint it, and I was getting to the place where I couldn't even take it, I'd book an event, like I might book an event to go to play some 40k with some pals, and it might be 6 months away. And I'd build my list, I'd start painting it, and it would take me that 6 months. And I'd get 3 months in and they changed it and I couldn't take the list.
Yeah,
And I'm
that's
like, well, I've
crazy.
painted this stuff and I can't use it because you've
Yeah,
now said I can only have one of that, or
yeah,
I can't take this weapon in that unit, or whatever the change is. And that for me was really hard. And I think it's one of the things that's so tricky about any system of adjustment for gaming is it's really hard when you start doing stuff that you know is going to make people feel bad.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I think it's so nice if you can incentivize good behavior, if you like, rather than
Punish
punish
bad
or
behavior.
against
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I mean,
Because
I absolutely. I'm all in favor of, where possible, giving bonuses to the armies that you don't see at the top tables, as opposed to minuses to the armies that you do see at the top tables. If that makes any sense, because then if you start giving minuses to things and saying you can't take that, you can't take that, then you just piss people off because they spent a long time painting that model or whatever. Yeah,
yeah, and I think we try really hard with our system to not do that all the time. And sometimes it's unavoidable. There's no way of doing
yeah,
something other than saying,
exactly.
no, you've got to pay for that, mate. It's just
Yeah,
really good.
yeah, yeah,
But I
absolutely.
think if you can say, well, actually, we're gonna, Bretonians really had a resurgence, and I think that's come from the fact that we've said, actually, we're gonna make like virtues and magic items separate,
Hmm.
and it's meant that there's more flexible builds, and instead of seeing 10 paladins because that was the only way they could win a game, you actually now see 3 or 4 paladins, 3 or 4 units of knights, but the quality of the paladins is quite high, and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
list is more flexible than it was. And that's all really come about from saying, have some more options, have some more choices,
Hmm.
rather than saying, well, we're going to batter everyone else's lists down so you can do better.
Although, I mean, obviously, yeah, it's a great thing in the sense that it's very inclusive in that you can literally bring what you want, and there's nothing's banned in a sense. Like,
Yeah, we
what
try to ban very little, to be fair. We
yeah.
try.
Well, but that would be my one criticism is perhaps like, when you look at the comp pack and you see, okay, Alario Incarnate -7 to comp. I mean, why don't you just ban that? It seems like -7. But I mean, that's just me personally. I mean, obviously we used your comp pack for the London Legends and we didn't change any of it. And I spoke to Mark and Luke about this, and perhaps I'm more in favor of banning things than they are. And in the end, we just sort of decided to keep it as it is. But there'd be some things there, like the massive monster that can thunderstomp everything. I just think, well, is that in the spirit of things? But
Do you know what? I think it's a totally reasonable position to take. I completely agree. And um, it's interesting. The monsters being added, just to touch on that point before I forget,
yeah,
that came from lots of people coming to the events and saying, do you know what's really rubbish about Warhammer? I bought all these cool full drill models and I can't use any of them. So I was like, right, let's see if I can come up with a way so you can use your full drill models. Do you know what I mean?
sure,
But
sure.
and that's really where it came from. But I do agree. And whenever Tim Richardson runs an event up in sort of Sheffield, he uses our pack and he always bans stuff. He's
Yeah,
always like, the monsters are out,
yeah.
the end times characters, they're out, this guy's out, um, and that's good in a way. Like, I think that's healthy in a way because
Different
you're
types of
saying
events. Yeah, yeah,
this is a different type of event.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
That's really cool for me because now I'll go away and build something that's slightly different. And it's lovely that you wanted to use our pack to do it with. And I think there are advantages to our pack, and it's not because I did it, it's because we've done it for years and lots of people have used it. It's got better because of that.
yeah, yeah.
It's well used, so it's well maintained, and it's a good little framework. But that doesn't mean you can't, bolt some stuff out or bolt some stuff in and say, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Originally, one of the big reasons for me not wanting to ban stuff was I was always really aware in that kind of 2016, 2017 era where the numbers of people really playing the game were probably at their lowest in terms of we'd had the big explosion, people
Yeah.
had really faded off, and it was going to take time for it to come back. And the thing I was always concerned about was someone buying a ticket quite late, not submitting an army list, rocking up on the day and saying, these are the figures I've got. And the last thing I wanted to do was say, sorry, mate, that's banned. You can't use it.
Yeah, yeah,
Because the whole thing, particularly when the community was small. So that was where the idea of well, when we won't ban anything if we can not ban it came from. And I think now there's a legitimate argument to say, well, the community's thriving.
yeah,
People have got lots of choice that you can ban stuff and be happy. But I suppose it's just become part of the USP. But
yeah, yeah,
but certainly, Yeah, not banning stuff keeps us in comp writing as well sometimes. Someone discovers something that we didn't consider, and
Well, is
I
there
sit
any
there with a
are there
little
any
pen and
thoughts that you've
paper.
got? Are there any thoughts that you got for the 2024 comp then that you can share with us today?
Oh, am I going to get? I'm going to get in trouble.
Okay,
Certainly.
well, let me rephrase the question a bit then. So, are there any are there some factions that you think you don't see on the top tables enough that you think perhaps could do with a boost going forward? Like,
So faction wise, we're relatively happy at the moment.
okay,
Um, I think that's all right. So if we look at the top five of the two GTs, we had, I think it was 9 different factions across the
yeah,
two top fives. So that was really encouraging, because obviously you're thinking to yourself, well, there's quite a lot of, that's, 2/3 of the factions have made the top five across 2 events, which have been played in exactly the same way with exactly the same packs. So that was really nice data. There's always small things that you spot that you need to sort of adjust. But I think the thing at the moment that we're looking at most, sort of the thing that's sort of getting the eye of Sauron, if you like, at the moment, is just the interaction between the monsters from the compendium and Highlander in particular.
okay,
And I don't think that's a huge secret, because we've said that to people that have asked us at the events, is there anything that's standing out? And there's definitely, it's really interesting. When we put Highlander in, no one took it. It was completely and utterly ignored.
Hmm.
And I think it was 3 years before anyone made the top 3 with the Highlander list.
Okay.
But interestingly, now more and more people have started taking Highlander,
Hmm.
and so we get most of the time about half the lists are Highlander, and suddenly actually it doesn't feel as much of a disadvantage as it maybe once did, because if you haven't got 2 of everything, it's not so harsh when I show up and don't have 2 of everything, if you like.
Yeah.
But I think particularly there's some questions over, is it right that you can take, I don't know, a magma dragon and a regular dragon and be Highlander?
Oh, I get you.
But actually, you've still got 2 really chonky monsters
Hmm.
with breath weapons that fly around with almost the same stat line.
Hmm.
So and is that something we need to
I
look
mean,
at?
or
Because
you could even say, just off the top of my head, the Highlander is only for people who take their army from the army book, and if you start using end times or monstrous compendium, then it just doesn't count. Yeah.
yeah, and this is it. We've got like a bit of a working document at the moment with sort of half a dozen solutions and ideas, and generally what we'll try and do in the next, what have we got now? We'll put the new pack out around end of November,
Okay.
because that will generally put out then sort of start of December we put out the tickets for May. So
The tickets for what, sorry?
For the May GT.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Which is going to be much larger this year. It's going to be 70 players. So
yeah, and you got a new venue for that, right?
Yep, and we're really hopeful that will alleviate the horror that was like, it's lovely that so many people wanted to come, but I don't think in all the time I've run events, which is pushing on for 10 years now, I've never felt so bad as we felt in May this year, when the system could not cope. Like the actual website couldn't, it was selling the tickets so quickly it couldn't catch its own inventory, and we oversold the event. And then that was like, don't get me wrong, the community really got behind us and really supported us. We got together, we made it right, and about 80 different players across the 2 events managed to attend in the end, which was awesome. But yeah, that was really horrible and stressful. And actually, like, we really like the people that come to our events, like, like I'm sitting here chatting to you, and if you say to me, I'm really gutted I couldn't get a ticket, like, there is some of that you take home with you, and you think that's really rubbish, because I really like seeing Simon there and I really want him to get a ticket, so we're hoping to
and some people like they share a car, don't they, and they all drive down together, and if only some of them have got tickets, then
and that was a lot of what we ended up doing this year. We were saying, well, look, we can swap you, and you're coming with this guy and this guy, right? Well, we'll get you onto GT1, and you guys, are you happy to go to GT2 then? And that allowed us to to fix some of that, which was great. But I'm the bigger venue's good. That will hopefully alleviate that issue happening again. And in terms of the pack. Yeah, we'll play test some of those ideas now. Some
Yeah.
of the sort of potential solutions. We'll give that some throwing of dice between now and sort of mid-November, and then we'll make a decision on what we want to do about certain things that we see. But I don't think it's in a dreadful place at the moment, mainly because we had so much variation in the finishes at the events,
Yeah,
which is really good.
Yeah, no. So you mentioned November. Yeah, I mean we're hoping to sort out the London Legends organisation before Christmas this time, and try and get that organised before the new year, because we sort of we left it a bit late earlier this year. But
how did you find? Obviously, that's your first one.
Yeah.
How did you find like putting it together like that and kind of
Yeah,
like, the administration and stuff?
It's a lot of organisation. Yeah, I mean I did a large amount of that myself. Luke helped a lot with the compact. Mark helped a lot with the organisation, checking the list and all that. And so, we all sort of pitched in. And I totally agree with you that, you need help to run an event. I think even just on the day, you need at least two people there, because, someone will be asking you about a rule or whatever, and someone else, just whenever you've got lots of people.
Yeah.
People are people, isn't it? Everyone's an individual, and everyone has their own questions or their own issues. And so you need some help with it.
It's unavoidable. Two people are going to have an issue at the same moment.
Yeah.
Sorry, I talked over you then. Sorry, Simon, please finish.
No, it's cool. No, I think it's just a bit of a delay with the audio, but no, it was a really fun experience. Having gone to a bunch of events, mostly Triple Crown events, it was fun. It was kind of, you get those moments where everyone's just playing their game, and I get just 5 minutes just to chill and just sort of look around and go and see all of these fantastic armies and go and chat to people, and I'm quite a social person. I like to kind of, I went around asking, particularly people who'd come by themselves, that weren't there with a group of other people, and I'd say, look, come for beers Saturday night, get to meet some of the people who play the game in London, and try and add some people to the WhatsApp group that we've got, and just try and grow the community a bit more. And it's good to sort of do my bit at trying to get everyone together. Do
you know what though? I honestly think that's huge, and I really think that the events where people go out of their way as organisers to come and look at your game for 2 minutes and say, "Oh, that's really cool," or "Yeah, oh, cool. What are you doing tonight? Do you want to grab some food with us?" I really think it makes a difference. I loved coming to London because I bumped into some guys at that event that I'd not seen for like 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
And they were just so pleased to see me. And I was like, oh, it's so lovely to see you as well. And they're like, I've checked your channel out. And I was like, it's just a really lovely catch up. And I think that's the beauty of the fact that event fell on a weekend that was good for them and they could get there. So I think it's really healthy to have lots of events going on. And obviously I didn't have a bad event overall.
Yeah.
My second day saved me a lot, to be fair. The challenging first day, my second day pulled me out of the fire.
Yeah. No, there was some.
But no, it was great. So really pleased to hear you doing it again.
Yeah. So you got your narrative event coming up later this year. Remind people what the title is.
So this one is Arabia Blaze. We've got, I think, 2 tickets left.
Okay.
Let's pull that face. So we've had a couple of people that have pulled out. So we've got a couple of tickets remaining at the moment. Yeah. So that's in September. So it's really not very far away. I think it's only like 2 or 3 weeks away. I want to say, let me be all super professional and on it. I want to say that it is the 16th and 17th of September.
Okay.
So it's a bit early this year. Normally we do them in October, but unfortunately we couldn't get the venue in October. It was booked. So we've got it for September instead. But different.
I won't be able to make that myself. Kind of a busy time at work.
It's really tricky. And I think the other thing as well, like for some guys, we had a couple of guys email and they're like, look, we have to book our holiday loads in advance. Yeah. And we can book like a floating weekend in October. And we always come, and you always do it in October. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And they're like, look, we just can't swap it. And I was like, it is what it is. I'm like, sorry. We thought the venue had held it. They thought we didn't want it. I don't really know what happened, but we didn't get it. But yeah, it'll be good. It's very different, this one.
So I was going to say, yeah. I mean, so when it comes to designing a narrative event, how do you go about? I mean, so once you've decided what the narrative is and where the setting is, how do you then go about thinking about the rules and the The difference
So,
between the two.
yeah, I mean,
Is
this
it
is
just you that signs it, or is it, you sit down in a room and talk about
so
it with other
a
people?
lot of the, I suppose we all kind of have things that we do, if you like, on the channel. A lot of the narrative work's done by me.
Okay.
Um, not everything, and it would be useless without the others, because I'll have an idea and I'll put stuff together and I'll be like, right, I think we should do this. And then the guys will look at it and they'll be like, but what if someone did this? And you're like, that would be a really awful weekend, so we need to stop that happening. And so it kind of goes through that pull and pull process where you're almost saying to the others, you know, if I put this in front of you, what would you do to really spoil it for someone else? Do you know what I mean? Almost, because you're trying to avoid that. But like, ultimately, I suppose the motivation for me is it should feel fun and it should feel fresh. And it really needs to be a different way to play Warhammer, because
Yeah.
that's the reason you'd come, right? The reason you'd come is because it's totally, you know, what you would normally use is out of the window, and this is something different. So
You worry
that,
that sometimes it might get a bit too complicated, in the sense that obviously it's already quite, can be challenging to play 2,500 point game in 2.5 hours already. Adding more rules on the top of that, does that raise the bar of how good you need to be to play the game?
so I don't know if it raises the bar on how good you need to be.
Or how
I think
experienced? Yeah.
I think it can draw out a little bit of time, a bit
Yeah.
more time.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that the short answer really is, yeah, there's always a risk that it doesn't go quite the way you want it to, because you really are throwing it out to the wind. And I always try and sort of say and put in the pack, you know, like, this is meant to be a fun thing. It's not
Oh
meant
yeah.
to be
Yeah.
hardcore, you know. So think about that, because I'm sure that you will see something that I didn't perceive as a potential issue,
Yeah.
but it is.
Yeah.
I think the best example of that is when we did the Scorching the Khemri one. Had this like idea for the war of attrition, and like, as you go through the desert, like, the effects of the climate will change the way your army plays.
Mm.
We did the event and it was really good, and I was walking around the hall and we had kind of 40 odd players, and I was like, no one is using the attrition.
Really? Okay.
No one is using it. So I going to the tables and I'm like, I don't forget, it'd be like -1 to that overrun, because the attrition is like slowed your soldiers.
Mm.
And they're like, oh yeah. And I was like, okay, this is a bit weird. Like, what's the crack? And they're like, look, it's just too much to keep up with.
Mm.
I was like, okay, cool. So we got to the end of the event and I sort of was like, you know, any feedback would be good. And I wondered, before everyone goes, would anyone mind telling me what they thought of the attrition?
Mm.
Basically, no one used it.
Yeah.
They didn't use it because they were like, look, when we're 4 games in and you've got like 4 attrition effects, plus you're using a brand new special character, and
Yeah.
you've got these 3 new magic items in my list, it's just too much to remember, because I'm not playing a normal game either. I'm
Yeah.
playing a game where I score through a specific mission, or, and I was like, you know what? That was, yeah, it was definitely a hole in the mechanic. So I tried with the next ones to have less of that, if you know what I mean, and sort of, but you're walking a tightrope. Like, this time around, I said, like, we'll ban rulebook magic items.
Oh
Let's
yeah.
go wild. Let's ban rulebook
Yeah.
magic items. But here's like, but we'll do 50 new ones. So it's like having a new set of rules.
They
And
make sure
then
everyone prints it out and they've got it there to hand, right?
and then we got like sort of into the process, and Scott was like, have you started putting together any of those magic items yet? Because it's going to take you some time to come up with 50 magic items. I was like, yeah, it is. It's going to take me a lot of time to come up with any ideas, any
Yeah.
sticking on the board, any ideas, and we use them. So, but then I get to do really stupid things like 100% genuine rune fang or spooky sarcophagus sludge, and silly, like, you know, because I think that's the
Yeah.
joy of that sort of event. But
But the other thing I know is just that it's very inclusive, in the sense that, in the same way as the GT, you can take whatever you want. And most narrative campaigns, or at least the way I imagine it, they would have a restriction on the factions you can take. I mean, you take the old world, for example, they've said already there's only going to be 9 factions in the narrative of the old world. And there's no Skaven, there's no vampire counts, whatever. And yet you're sort of saying, well, we're in Araby, but you can have any faction. Did you not think about limiting the number of factions? Does that not even enter your head? Like, it's just you want it as inclusive as possible for everybody.
I think the truth is you'd love to be able to say it's Araby. So we have got Bretonnians, Tomb Kings. They're going to be our two, Kingmaker factions. We'll get some demons in there because they pop up from time to time. We could have some Black Arcs raiding the thing. But why are High Elves there? So maybe they shouldn't be. And I totally agree. And I think there's an argument to say that makes it more immersive almost because the story is much more driven around a smaller kind of cohort of players, if you like. But I think, you've hit the nail on the head. For me, I don't want to say to you, oh, you've got demons and dwarves, Simon. This is just not the event for you, mate.
It's not the event for you,
And I think that's ultimately where it always comes back to for me is I don't want you to feel like I put something on that wasn't for you or that didn't give you a chance to come and play Warhammer with your friends,
Yeah. I mean, it depends what you're going for, isn't it? I mean, I remember Tim Richardson, he was planning an event about the Battle for Hell Fen. Did you see that one?
He was, He came on our channel and talked about it, and I was really upset because I was even putting stuff together for it.
I couldn't make the date he said, and so I wasn't planning on going. But that would have been something I'd love to do, like just to immerse yourself in a historical scenario from Warhammer. But obviously, you're limiting yourself to certain factions, and then that limits the number of people who can come, and then some people won't be able to make the date, and then all of a sudden you can't have as many people at the event,
And there's a look, we should be really honest as well with the people that have tuned in to listen to me chat nonsense for some time. The truth is, when you put an event together, it costs a lot of money, right? It like if you look at the way we do events, we hire a venue. The venue costs a lot. We hire our van. We've got all of that equipment that goes down there. We've got all of our tables, all of our terrain. And ultimately, there is a number of tickets that we have to sell.
There's a fixed cost,
to be able to pay for that. Otherwise, it can't go ahead. So I think there's always that argument as well of saying, well, actually, like if you start saying, well, 50% of the people that play Warhammer aren't invited to this event. That might work if you've got a small gaming, if you're at a gaming centre, like you guys running at Dark Sphere, if you say to them, we only want to hire 10 tables this weekend, that's going to be great. But certainly with us,
there are some ways around that. I mean, you can sort of get people, pick a date and get people to register their interest before they buy tickets and things like that. There are sort of some ways around.
Of course,
yeah.
It's there's definitely resolution, but ultimately, there's got to be a number of tickets that you sell. Otherwise, you just can't put it on. So I think there's always that element of that as well. And I always try and think about it from the community point of view first, and then I'm reminded that we still have to actually pay for this venue when we hire it. They phone me up and say, do you want to pay your bill? And I'm like, that's
it's the money, man.
Scott's an accountant, that's his job. So,
Scott,
we're putting this together. Scott's like, I don't mind doing like the finances. I don't mind that either.
You're always the designated driver, mate. Yeah, cool. I mean, so my favorite setting in the old world is the Karak 8 Peaks, and I would love to do I've got no plans to do it, but to do a weekend where we have orcs and goblins, we have dwarves, we have Skaven, and then maybe you can add in some mercenary armies like some ogres and chaos dwarves, and you could maybe add in empire or reinforcements for the dwarves or something like that, and you maybe pick 7 or 8 factions in total and do a Karak 8 Peaks weekend or something like that. I mean, that would just be a dream for me.
I tell you what, I'd be well up for coming to that. If you want to put that together, Simon, you'll get me there. Karak 8 Peaks, it's just cool, right?
It's really cool, yeah.
That's just like that's just rule of cool for Warhammer. Queek Head Taker is the sole reason I had a Skaven army. And he was because he's cool. Like he's just, and I remember reading the Queek novel. If you've never read it,
I haven't.
Read it, you'll love it. And he literally is like so ridiculous. It's like quick, stab, and like it's really silly, but fantastic. And I think like there's that, like if I talk to you about Karak 8 Peaks, your whole demeanor is like smiley face, there's excitement, there's that is a level of emotional investment that ultimately is the reason that you paint toy soldiers.
Yeah,
It's the reason you want to do it.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, like hell fair. When Tim was saying I want to do that, I was like, sign me up right away.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
what? You know what? I've got all three of those armies. Whatever one you're struggling to recruit, let me know. I'll bring it. I want to do it.
Exactly.
It'd be
Yeah,
the same with 8 peaks. Let me know. I'll be there.
yeah.
I've got the figures. We can do this.
So yeah, I mean, so they obviously you've been seeing the development diaries for the old world. Are you excited about the old world? The new game, the old
Yeah,
world?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look.
The reason I asked that, I
The,
mean, obviously, I know you're excited, but the reason I ask it like that is because, I mean, for me, I'm a bit nervous about it in the sense that I'm worried that like it'll be good enough so that lots of people like it, but I won't like it. Does that make sense?
yeah, I know
Yeah.
what you're saying. I I kind of have got to this place where I'm like, I want to be positive, right? Because we've not had anything fresh for so long.
Yeah.
And actually, like that is such a motivator for me. It's so exciting to think I'm gonna get something fresh. I'm gonna get some new rules, some new figures, something different. And it's I think it's one of the things that's made the narrative packs that we do successful is that it's got something new in it, right? And people go, oh, there's a new item or a new way of playing or whatever it is. I just think there's that kind of shiny new syndrome is something that we've just not had
Yeah.
so for so long now. And that gets me so excited. Um, Obviously my beloved vampire counts. Not on that
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
on that list of 9. I do have 7 of the others though. That's just a very, very sad state of affairs for
No,
me
you're in
to
a good place.
be. But um in a way that also motivates me. I'm like, so we know they're going to get a PDF, and maybe they're not going to be quite as good as the other stuff. Okay, cool. What can we do? Can we do something with comp? Can we do something with missions? With like
Yeah.
like for me that just becomes like the next exciting thing. But yeah, it's been. I know there's been lots of controversy, and I
Well,
don't know if
that
you
was
sort
yeah.
of go on.
No, that was my next question. What, why do you think there's lots of controversy about it? I mean, where does that come from? Is it because people are emotionally invested in certain editions, or is it because of the amount of time they spent on the models, or where does it come from?
I think sometimes, like, I think that people get in their head the idea of what they want something to be. And the longer they wait, the bigger the idea in their head becomes almost. And I don't think it's exclusive to Warhammer. I think, like look at the Star Wars sequels.
Okay, yeah,
Fans of Star Wars had in their head what Star Wars needed to be for those sequels. And when it wasn't those things, they're really upset about it.
yeah,
Um, and that's not a value judgment on whether they were good or bad from me. It's just a kind of almost like a social comment. And I think like you see it with lots of things. I know lots of people that didn't like the last Avengers movie because the one before it they really loved and they felt it built up a story that the last one failed to deliver for them. But actually, that story was from their head. It was where they felt it should go now, and it didn't. So they didn't like it.
yeah, yeah.
I think there's always an element of that, and um, it's really hard, isn't it?
Mm.
Because you don't want to be like rude, but I think like sometimes we all look at stuff and think, I've had a bad day, and
Sure. I mean,
you know,
the internet is the internet, right? I mean, people on a Facebook group or whatever, you've just
you,
got to
you,
take a step back and be like,
you
okay,
can't solve that. And someone
yeah,
said to me the other day, there's two things wargamers like. There's two things that wargamers can't stand. They can't stand change, and they can't stand things staying the same. And
yeah.
I was like, that's
Well,
really
it's funny because
interesting.
I mean, I'd be quite happy if Eighth Edition was sort of re-released with a few tweaks in the rules, sort of thing.
Hmm.
So I'm quite happy. Mainly things stay the same, but I think also, and I was chatting to Luke about this the other day, and he was saying this that the community that we have, even though it's great and we see the same people often, and I really like those people, it would be good for the community as a whole if there were more people coming in and it got bigger. I mean, it is getting bigger, but
Yeah,
had a big influx of people.
I agree. I think new faces is always nice. It gives you a chance to make new friends, to experience new things. And you know, I just think, like, I like you, like a couple of years ago, I was saying I'd be really shocked if it was massively different, right?
Yeah,
Because I was like, it's just easy to spend that time working on new models rather than spending that time making massive changes to the rules. And
correct.
that was my thought process. And I think that from what we've seen from the development diaries, it probably is going to be quite different.
Yeah,
Um, and I wouldn't be shocked if it was lots of kind of new mechanics, stuff that we've not seen in Warhammer. So I played 6th, 7th, and 8th.
okay.
And it wouldn't shock me to see things come in that I've never seen. Like, it seems like the magic phase is going to go from what we've seen.
Yeah,
So that's a huge shift, right? Because every set of rules I've ever played had a magic phase.
yeah.
So how are they going to do that? Is it going to be like 40k psychic phases were in the past, where you rolled a couple of dice and had to get your leadership value to cast, or roll 2 dice and see if you beat a number? Or will it be that you generate power dice at the start of the turn and
Right.
you can spend them, you know, to cast magic spells in different phases?
Yeah,
I genuinely,
we don't
who
know.
knows?
Yeah,
Like, so, and obviously there's going to be people that go, I really hate that.
yeah, exactly. And that's the other
Um,
point, isn't it? The community is not just one community. It's already very fractured of people playing different
yeah, of
games.
course.
So you can't please everybody. And so there's going to be people who are pissed off, whatever happens.
Yeah, and I think that unfortunately, like you say, is unavoidable. But in a weird way, I also think like they'll probably play it as well. I think they'll probably give it a go and they'll
Right.
probably get stuck in, because if you look at like other war games, I'll take 40k because it's an easy example. Um, there's normally a bit of that in 40k as well. Something comes out, people moan, but they moan because they played it last weekend when they went to this event, or they, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
they
They
moan
play
because
it,
they're
yeah.
seeing it and they're experiencing it and they're part of it. So that's not to sort of say that there aren't legitimate criticisms of things. Of course there are sometimes. But I also think like people moaned in 8th when new books came out and new items came out.
Mm.
And then over time we all worked out what we do to counter that. Or people like,
It is slightly different for Warhammer Fantasy, though, in the sense that because they discontinued the game, the fans have made their own versions of the game
yeah,
and started to introduce the rules that the fans want. And so it's taken a direction which is much less centralized. And so when the central kind of authority of Games Workshop comes back in, some people may just be like, well, you guys aren't really the hobby anymore. You guys don't really know what's best anymore. I mean, so has Games Workshop contacted you guys, for example, about the old world?
no.
Right. I mean,
No,
okay. Obviously, that may seem like a bit of an odd question to ask you, but obviously the reason why I'm asking is because if I was developing the old world, I'd want to speak to the people who are still playing the game and have been playing the game all this time and see what their opinions are on, like competitive play. I mean, even though it may not be designed for competitive play, as soon as it's released, I guarantee you people will be saying, "How can we play this competitively?"
absolutely.
Yeah,
You're going to have people that want to play it in all different ways from day one.
yeah,
Can I
yeah,
play it small? Can I play it massive? Can I, you know, if I just think about our gaming club, there'll be guys there that want to play like 1,000 points or 500 points because they want quick games
yeah,
because of the way their lives are, and there'll be guys there that want to go out on a Sunday and put 10,000 points down the side, and that's their Sunday.
yeah.
So you're always going to have that, aren't you? That's unavoidable. Yeah, like I say, Games Workshop haven't spoken to us.
No, no.
You know, obviously that's their prerogative.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
We've never been closed to anyone. We'll talk to anyone and we'll work with anyone that wants to work with us. Really, like, but we are just 3 or 4 guys that
Sure,
play a lot
sure.
of Warhammer. Do you know what I mean? And run some
Well, so,
events and
so is Games
do some stuff
Workshop
on
now.
YouTube. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I'd love to, you know, work with Games Workshop on it. I would have loved to from day one, but
yeah, yeah.
that's obviously they've got what they want to do with the game. So
So assuming the rules are sound, does Triple Crown Wargaming embrace the old world entirely?
I think, like, I can't imagine an instance where we don't do content when it comes out. I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
can't see it, and I imagine that will be quite an intense period when it first comes out. I imagine it'll
exactly.
be
Yeah,
lots of videos because, like, honestly, we'll be excited, and at our core, we're just hobbyists. We're just guys that want to to play games of Warhammer and run cool events and hang out with our friends, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we will produce content. That's for definite when it comes out, and I imagine that in the short term that will probably be most of the content we do. It will probably just be, here's a big chunk of old world content. Let's see what it's like. Let's get stuck in, you know,
Yeah.
because I think we'll be exploring it ourselves like that. And
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
and I think there's probably an appetite for that, if I'm being honest. I don't think that I'm alone in being excited about the potential for this. And as I said earlier, I think like we'll all have things we look at and go, oh yeah, I liked that better like this. Or
Well, it'll be interesting
know,
to see if because obviously lots more people will come into the game, and there'll be people who used to play it who'll come back into it. There'll be people who play AOS and play 40k who will then start making old world content online. I mean, there'll be people with big YouTube channels and who will start doing old world
absolutely.
content. And it'd be interesting to see whether people will just gravitate to what they know, or whether they'll look at people who currently play 8th edition or 9th age or whatever and attach some value to someone who's been playing the game for a long time, as opposed to someone who's just come back into it because it's been released by Games Workshop. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that that'll be up to people, won't
Oh,
it?
we'll
I
see.
mean,
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's not like I can say. I mean, from my point of view, I would look at people that have produced content over time, but I would
Yeah.
say that because I
Of
produce
course.
content,
Yeah.
I suppose. But I think for me, that's the sort of gamer I am. Like, I'm going to want to get a picture of where the transferable skills are. Like I can't imagine that like most of the core mechanics of like movement will
Yeah.
change like drastically.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
like there's a lot of transferable skill there for definite.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And so and as I personally think that's the biggest, tactical area of the game.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If I was looking, I would be thinking, well, where are the guys that do
Yeah.
that well before, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. The movement phase is the hardest part of the game, is to get right. I mean, if you're used to playing, round bases and just doesn't really matter where they are,
it's going to be a shock to the system
going
for
to be a
people
shock
coming
to
from skirmish games, isn't it? Because
yeah.
and certainly from what they were saying in their development diaries about kind of punching holes in battle lines, and that sounds a lot more like what you had in really early editions of Warhammer. So that's going to be massively different to people that are used to kind of 360 arcs of sight and the ability to kind of daisy chain some figures out of a position or whatever. So yeah, but I mean, ultimately, I suppose that will come down to lots of factors. Really, it'll come down to where people see the value in their content,
Yeah.
where they go to find their content. I think people going in like currently, was there like 40,000 people in the Old World group on Facebook? Like,
Right.
there's a lot, and if you're going there, you're probably gonna see people that produce content now first, if you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than necessarily seeing people that hop on a bandwagon, if you like.
Right. Yeah.
So I
Exactly.
suppose there'll be drivers there, and I imagine that the truth is that everyone will get an increase in traffic one way or another, because once you
Absolutely.
start, even if you start going to events and someone's talking, you say, oh, Simon's channel is where you want to be checking out, because they're gonna see that, and so suddenly it's, oh well, I better log on to. So I think it will spread. I mean, what about yourself? You said like you're a bit apprehensive.
Yeah, just in the sense that, well, there's been some releases where I've got really excited about it and been like, hey, this is Warhammer Fantasy Battles 9th edition sort of thing. Whereas other times I've sort of, okay, well, now it looks like it's a lot less in its scope. And maybe it's going to be simplified to speed it up. Do you know what I mean? And maybe it won't be as good. But like you say, I'm going to end up playing it. Well, kind of just because it's Warhammer. It looks like Warhammer, and it's not like radically different in any way that I won't enjoy it. But whether I still end up playing 8th as well, do you know what I mean? That's a possibility.
Yeah, and do you know what? Lots of people have spoken to us at events, like certainly at Derby and at the GTs this year, saying I'm really excited about it, and it might be like, I know quite a lot of people that are like, I'm doing a new army for it.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Yeah, I'm
you've
not
got
doing
like
that.
you've got like 6 armies, mate, and they're like, yeah, but I'm doing a new army for it because
Yeah.
you know, like that way I can still play this, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, great. Yeah.
whatever.
Exactly.
And I think that's the other thing is that
And
like
there'll be a lot of people who want to use AOS models for fantasy as well. I wonder how people will handle that in the sense that, I mean, it doesn't bother me if the models suit what you're trying to play, whatever.
I think you hit the nail on the head for me. It's
Yeah.
always going to come back to a like, is that an appropriate figure for that job? Like
Yeah.
I've got a Sinesh Warriors of Chaos army, which because it's not painted, I've not put it on any of our videos, so you won't have seen it. But that's made with the Sinesh AOS Warriors they did with
Yeah.
like the cutlasses and the big shields. And you look at them and go, oh right, they're warriors, they're Sineshi, they're
Right.
Sinesh Chaos Warriors then.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's really easy to work out what they are. If
Yeah.
I suddenly took like the gigantic chariot they did for that Sinesh range and whacked it on 2 Terrorgeist bases and put it down, you would have no clue what it was.
Right.
There's nothing, you know what I mean? And I'm saying, oh, it's a Chaos Dragon. What? No, it's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's no. So I think there's always, but I think we actually have a lot of that now, particularly for the
Yeah.
armies that have been non-supported for such a long time.
Yeah.
Certainly, there's lots of stuff that pops up and appears. Like at Derby, there's a High Elf player, and all of his archers were those Lumineth
Sure.
Realm Lord archers, and it's like, well, is
Well, I would
that
have, for example. Yeah.
not really? Because they're as long as it's clear,
Yeah.
and it's always tough. We always put in our event packs. If you're going to use something that's not the model, please send us a picture. Like,
Yeah.
we don't want to spoil your hobby, but we also don't want someone to be playing you on the day and you go, and now I'm going to shoot you with them. What? They've got sword and shield, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
no, but they're my blunderbusses. What? You know what I mean? Like, you don't want that feel bad moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I think it's like anything. You're always gonna see that happen, and everyone will just have to muck through, I guess, and work out what's the best and right course of action. I'm certainly excited about the amount of old figures it seems like they're going to be coming back.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So seen lots of pictures of like dwarf slayers on their diaries, and I'm like, that's basically the only unit I don't have.
Are they really going to sell those old metal slayers again?
It looks like they are, man. And
No.
look at the excitement in my face. Look at it. Look at it. It's going in. It's the only thing I haven't got. Can't wait.
They're like what, £7-8 a model on eBay or whatever. Yeah.
They're ridiculous to get sort of secondhand, and
there's loads of them kicking about, but they're still really popular.
Yeah, people really. I think it's that thing, isn't it? It's the almost the artificial economy of it with figures now, where what someone will pay for it is the price, and it's like, well, I saw these ones sell for 120 quid on eBay. You're like, other online auction sites are available. Sorry. So suddenly you think you'll put yours up for that. Like, yes, someone was willing to pay that, but the vast majority of us do not have that kicking around in our back pocket for 10 figures, you know, like, so let's come on, let's be realistic and think about the wider community. But I suppose that's not really what it's about.
It's the market at the end of the day.
I got all super political for a minute then. That was really odd.
No, well, it is what it is. I mean, is a 3-bedroom semi-detached house in Harrow in London worth £750,000? Well, no, but also yes, because someone's paying it.
Someone's going to pay for it, and that's the challenge, isn't it? All the time, and and I think there's a big positive in that, because there are people that do look at these things as opportunities to make lots of money, and I'm not saying that's bad or good. I'm not assigning value there, but you know, ultimately, someone like you, if you want a particularly cool dwarf model that you don't have, you'd like to get that for not having to remortgage a 3-bedroom house in Harrow. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be nice to get it and get it painted. So
what's is 8th edition your favorite edition of Warhammer, or did you prefer one of the others?
So of the 3 that I played lots of, but by a country mile, I really like the spectacle of 8th edition.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Yeah.
I like the fact that armies look like armies, and when I think about the sort of lists I ran in 7th when I was playing to kind of try and win the game, they didn't really look like armies. They were lots of MSU, you know, 7s and 10s, nothing really ever bigger than that. And that's cool to have that sometimes, but that would be kind of every army. And
yeah,
I'd probably just have a big dragon because they were really good.
sure.
And some bolt throwers, and then, you know, lots of small units of swordmasters and things like that. And it's all very, anyone who played lots of 7th editions sitting there rolling their eyes now. Because
Well, I mean,
everyone's seen that list 1,000 times. They're like, oh, here we go.
yeah. Well, it's kind of at the risk of getting into a controversial topic here, isn't it? Where people are in the comment section already, oh, but 8th edition, da, da, da. But it's like, as you say, the spectacle of it, just aesthetically, and it's good that there's a reward for spending the time of painting 40 models of the same type. Obviously, it's much nicer to paint 10 sword masters, 10 Phoenix Guard, 10 archers. That's much nicer as a hobby.
Yeah.
But if you've actually sat down and painted 40 spearmen, the fact that there's a reward for that and you get to have this really cool, massive unit on the tabletop that looks amazing. Yeah, but that does it for me as well.
Yeah, and I really like the potential for like unit fillers and cool stuff.
Yeah,
like that as well, which having the bigger units does. Look, you know, I think that in a weird way, like when people talk about their favorite editions and things like that, the conversation isn't always that grown up. And I think like you're right with the comment section 100% is like, just because I really like 8th and I like the spectacle doesn't mean I don't recognize the problems with steadfast as a rule, or you know, the challenges that's brought to the game for cavalry, or whatever you want to say. Like I think like you can I don't think people do that enough. Like and it's just classic internet entrenchment, isn't it? People sort of go, you know, I'm a 6th eder, I'm an 8th eder, and they sort of there's my edition's perfect. Well, actually, it's probably not. There's probably stuff from both of those sets of rules. I played both rule sets, and you know, heroes felt really, really amazing in 6th edition to me. They always felt really good. And a level 4 wizard usually feels mandatory to me in 8th edition. So,
sure.
You know, I can appreciate that those things probably could have been looked at. You know,
but do you feel there's any scope for like adding in some house rules to your comp pack? Obviously, you've got the comp system, and obviously you don't want to put massive changes, but something that's like you mentioned Steadfast, for example. I was playing a game the other day against Drew's Bretonians, and I literally got his Knights Errant we're in combat with my Blood Crushers in the front, and I had a Bloodthirster and a Soul Grinder flanking these Knights Errant, right? They destroyed a bunch of them. There was only 4 left, but they only need 3 to have a rank.
Be steadfast.
They were steadfast. And I was thought, this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. I mean, do you ever get tempted just to add in a little house rule that says, okay, for the purposes of breaking steadfast, you know, fast cavalry count as 1, heavy cavalry count as 2, a monster counts as 5, or whatever?
I really hope Tim Richardson's watching this. He's gonna love this line of questioning. It's like his favorite thing to like chew on my ear about. I'll be brutally honest and say we're always tempted. You're always tempted, but I do think that there is an element of the kind of well, we know best attitude almost in those things sometimes, and that's not to be rude to anyone that's doing it, because I really try and be really open and fair when I talk about things. But like for me, I want you to kind of feel like you're playing Warhammer, as close to the kind of box experience as you can have. And I think that like changing a rule here and a rule there, and over time, I think that's how you end up kind of progressing to the 9th age, or progressing to 8.5. And that's no criticism of those as systems. I just think it's a track that ends up quite a long way away from where you start. But yeah, of course, there's loads of stuff that stands out when you see it in those things. Like why is it that a dragon charge? I use dragon because, you know, they're my favorite, right? But I don't know if I've made that clear. You know, he charges like 30 halberdiers, he smashes them apart, he breath weapons them, he thunderstorms them, and there's 6 left. And they're like, yeah, it doesn't matter that you've won the combat by 24. We're steadfast, mate. Yeah, okay, I can see the issue, because that feels really odd. Because there's if there was only 3 of your mates left, you'd have run. But because there's 4 of you, totally get it. And I think that that's one that's really egregious, and I think it's not the only one, but it's one
Yeah.
that really sticks out for people, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a few ones. Yeah, yeah.
Because I think that's the one that we've all got that story of, like, the game where that happened.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. Or there's the cannon hitting the rider and the dragon, or things like that, and you just think, well, let's just tweak it, maybe.
Do you know, Reign of Chaos is one that lots of people get upset about as well, which is a great one. It's like,
yeah,
I was winning the game, I was smashing it, and then he rolled Dark Prince first, and my general died.
yeah,
And you're like, yeah, okay. Like, I get it, because I'd be really upset as well if my 600-point general died to Dark Prince first on turn 6 on the last, throw of the dice. So,
but that's chaos for you anyway.
but that, like,
Clues in the name.
that's why you're playing Warhammer. Ultimately, like, it is a
Yeah.
random game, and it is a game that's has these weird moments, and those
Oh
are
yeah.
the photograph moments. They're the ones that actually, the reason you're telling me about that 4 years after it happened is because it's stuck in your mind for 4 years, because it's a photograph moment,
Oh,
But
I mean, I love Eighth Edition, but it is definitely, it's a game. It's like there's so many big dice rolls and silly moments, and you can really kind of be losing quite heavily and then make a big comeback, and there's a
yeah,
lot of randomness.
100%, you can really swing it, and
Yeah.
and I think that's where, like, ultimately, like, when we were talking right at the beginning about, I do tactics videos, I do, but, like, there's just nothing you can do.
It's a dice game. Yeah, yeah.
Like, you think you've done everything you can, and those are the games I usually get most frustrated in, because I'm like, I feel like I did everything right, but I just rolled 4 ones then, and that's it, that I've lost. So, or if it's Max, it's he rolled a 10 for a leadership 9 unit and then rolled an 11 on his reroll and ran away.
Yeah.
So, but I think you're always going to have that.
Yeah.
And I think when you take the randomness out, it actually becomes a lot less enjoyable game. It becomes
Absolutely, yeah.
It
Yeah.
becomes.
I haven't played the Ninth Age, but I think instinctively it doesn't appeal to me as much, because it seems like they're trying to even everything out too much, and therefore all the armies kind of seem too balanced in a sense, which makes it kind of like they're more similar.
Yeah, I think flavour is really hard to achieve if things aren't different, and then when things are quite different, balance is hard to achieve, isn't it? It's always a game, but ultimately, like, if you want a game where everything is even and balanced, then really you're playing chess.
Yeah.
And chess is great. It's been around for, like, what, 4,000 years. It's a phenomenal game. No one's saying it's bad, but
Yeah.
like, that's not, like, Warhammer isn't chess.
Yeah.
And there's elements that are like chess where you can do things and then you roll the dice and it goes wrong.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's just that's what you signed up for. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's why you're here.
Yeah.
So and not playing chess. So, but yeah, I really like Eighth in general. I like the fact there's wacky and zany things, and for me, I like the fact that they sometimes present me with an overwhelming tactical challenge I wasn't expecting. So it can be going really well, and then my opponent rocks a big total power, or rolls a 6/6 charge, and I'm like, oh
yeah.
And then I had one the other night, and I was really doing well in this game, and I was really in control, and he shot a stone thrower and got a direct hit and killed my monster, and I was like, oh. Then it was a 6-win monster, and I failed my ward save, and he rolled 6. I was like, oh, well, that's massively changed what I was about to do.
Yeah.
Back to the drawing board then, and so I like that sometimes. I think that can be really engaging, because otherwise it does become a bit monotonous.
Well, from the sound of the that latest release they did about the old world, it sounds like they're going to take away the big spells. Like, there won't be any purple sun that wrecks your army. Is that what from the wording of it? It sounds like that.
Yeah, I think again, they're really controversial subjects. I did a video a long time ago talking about the fact that I think that people look at elements of Eighth in isolation sometimes.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, big unit with loads of characters. He's really broken. It's really silly. There's nothing that can defeat, like, 40 Chaos Chosen with a Chaos Lord and this. And you're like, okay. And then they sort of in the next breath say, and it's really stupid. Like, you can cast one spell and kill a third of a unit, and, like, it doesn't matter, and they don't get a save. And you're like, I don't think you've equated there the fact that these things are actually they're the counters for each other. They're you chose to take that really sick unit. Well, I've turned a third of them into gold statues.
Exactly.
Sorry about that, buddy. So I think that like there's almost a miss to that, and so I've always been like a staunch defender of those big spells because I'm like they're the hard counters for when you build a big filthy thing that no one can kill.
But there's big spells like the gold statues and like the pit of shade, and then there's Purple Sun.
It's iconic, isn't it? That's the one.
And then well, there's a couple. There's Purple Sun. There's Cacophonic Choir.
Yeah.
There's that affect multiple units. Do you know what I mean?
I think that particularly with Sun, because you don't get any saves, like, and because there's some armies that they're just really rubbish against Purple Sun. You know, like dwarves, certain demons, orcs and goblins, even Empire. 50% of the time they're dead every time. Like that's. I think again, like the fact that I can get on the end of a battle line and whack through 10 units, that's the thing that people find really egregious. And I have to say, it's really hard to defend Purple Sun.
I would just say
I can't defend Purple Sun. It's just really dirty. There's nothing I can do about that. Sorry.
Yeah. My personal rule would be just allow magic resistance. So maybe if you don't allow a ward save, maybe just allow magic resistance or something like that.
Yeah, I think there's things you could do. I do think Old World Rise, you're spot on. I think they will go.
Yeah.
But I also think from looking at a lot of the pictures, I think that you will see more middle-sized units anyway.
True,
I think it's really interesting. I think that when you really look at the armies that tend to really perform consistently at events, they don't tend to have those stars anymore. They tend to be like 3 or 4 really decent threats. And I think that's something that's happened because of the ability to dwell as a star.
Yeah.
And that's where I think people get so upset with Purple Sun, because there isn't, you know, it kills one massive unit just like it kills 3 medium-sized units. And I think that's what's so egregious. But I think if those pictures that we've seen are representative of how the game plays, the chances are you are not going to miss those big killer spells in that way, because if you're not stuffing 4 characters into a unit of 40 white lions, do I need gold statues? Well, exactly, I probably don't. So do I want to just do something that turns the game into 20 minutes and you're packing your models away? No, I don't. So you know,
and as we said before, not everyone's going to be happy with all of the changes. Personally, I really love big hordes and stuff like that. But then again, I totally understand that from a commercial point of view, people don't want to buy 40 of the same model. They want to buy 15 of that model, 20 of that model, 10 of that model, and paint it up.
I think it's I really think it's interesting, because I do think there are some hobbyists that like the buying lots of the same and having big units of it. And I do also think there are those that like lots of kind of smaller units like more regularly. So I totally agree. I mean, from a Games Workshop's point of view, really, I've always found that a really thin argument, and that's not to be unkind, but you know, you've got to have 40-man units to make that competitive. You know, for effect comment. Okay, so how is that any more expensive than 2 20-man units?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But it's not, because you're going to buy 4 boxes of something is what you're going to buy. And so I think that everyone has got like a kind of a point of view, haven't they, on that issue? But I mean, like war games generally, people have more models now than they did 10 years ago or 15 years ago. When I started playing, you did play smaller amounts of models. And now, even like when I look at skirmish games, they have lots of models now. So
really, okay,
you know, that just seems to be part of the course. Like,
I think one criticism I have of 8th edition is the scalability of it. I think it works very well at 2,000 points and up. Well, not too high, but 2,000, 2,500, 3,000. When I've tried to play games of 1,500, 1,200, little games, I find that if I'm playing to win, I find that it doesn't feel like I'm playing with a small army. It feels like I'm playing with half of a big army, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think that I think it's really tricky. I think you almost like, I think
I'll give you an example. Let's say I've got a 2,500 point list. And let's say I've got a block of 40 something and 2 blocks of 30 something. When I want to size that list down, I don't shrink each of those units. I just take one unit out and I keep the block of 40. You know what I mean? Because why get rid of the big horde? Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think you're right in that we don't necessarily sit down and think, well, how would I build a 1,000 point army list? We go, what would I like to what do I normally take? That's really good. Well, I want that stuff. Oh, that's my 1,000 points. Okay. I
Exactly.
completely agree. And actually, like, when was the last time any of us went, I'm gonna lead my army with a Herald of Khorne, not a Bloodthirster, for example. You know, when did we, I mean, that's possibly more common than some of
Yeah.
the others. But when did we go, I'm not going to take an Archmage, I'm going to lead my army with this level 2 mage or whatever? We
Yeah.
don't, because we think, well, what, definitely want my Archmage,
Yeah.
obviously.
Exactly.
So I agree. I think that is a challenge. And I actually think when you start getting past 3,000 points, you want to do something with the magic dice as well.
Yeah, that's
For
another
them to
point.
feel for them to feel like they're having as much of an impact on the game. And some people they like the fact that the magic doesn't scale up and the magic becomes less impactful as the game gets
Yeah.
larger.
Yeah.
But I think to keep the feel the same, you have to start going, well, actually, well, you roll 3 dice and I'll get the 2 highest or the highest and the lowest. And you know, there's lots of ways that people kind of get around that when you're playing those bigger size games as well.
Yeah, makes sense.
But I suppose there's an element of saying, well, 16 armies, trying to design something where they can all kind of feel about right. I suppose if I was designing the game, I'd probably say, well, what sort of amount of points do I want to? That would definitely be in my mind. I'd be thinking, well, what is the size of the game?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Or maybe just have a way where you say, look, if you're playing like, under 2,000 points or under 1,500 points, the maximum size unit you can have is 300-point unit or 350-point unit or whatever.
yeah. And you know what? I've been to events in the past where they were like, the biggest unit you can have is 450 points.
Okay.
Like we have like the caps when the unit gets over a size. But I've been to events where they're like, you cannot take a unit bigger than this.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it costs more points than that, you can't take it. And that's huge for that reason. And I do agree. I do think there's definitely been a missed opportunity of saying, you know, skirmish, battle, grand battle, or historical cacophony, whatever you want to call it. I don't know, some clever term, but there's almost like 3 styles of playing. And actually, like, this is the way your army, you know, you don't need to have a different rule set. You don't need to have a different army book. You just say, you may not take lords in skirmishes.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, okay, cool. Units may not be over this size of points in skirmish. You may only take one unit from the rest. Like, you know, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And then say, you know, grand armies are built in the way we play normal Warhammer, or, you know, battle line armies. So if you're playing these points values, it's considered a battle line game. And if you're playing bigger, it's considered, you know, an apocalypse or a battle of legendary tales or whatever. And that changes. And they do have like grand battles in current rules where you get more rare and special duplications over 3,000 points.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But no one uses it. But it is in there. And certainly when I look at like Lord of the Rings, or if you look at New 40K, and I'll just use games as examples because they're obviously transferable in terms of they're being written by the same company.
Yeah.
They have that in those games as well, where kind of the size of the games is dictated. The size of, I mean, for Lord of the Rings, it dictates the size of the playing surface, for example.
Oh,
And
really? Okay. Yeah.
so you have like 4 foot by 4 foot, or then you go to 1,000, you probably play on a 6 foot by 4 foot.
Yeah.
And for 40k, I've only played one game of new 40k, so I'm really not an authority. A guy from work was like, "Come on, play this," and I was like, "Yeah, I've got some figures. I'll pull some out of the cupboard." And it was more really about hanging out with my friend from work. But
Yeah.
but in that, it's got like 3 different names of the games, which I don't know what they are. I'm sorry. And it's like 1,000 points, 2,000 points, 3,000 points, basically. And they're different names of games, and the missions you play are different, and the way you play is different, which I think is really smart, and is probably something that I would have advocated.
Yeah.
If I was involved in
I think I like generally the fact that even if I'm trying to play it competitively, that the game ultimately, it's a gentleman's game, right? You need to trust your opponent in some way.
Yeah.
That they are playing with the army that's in their army list, that they're not going to pick up the dice too quickly, that they're, it's there has to be some trust there to play the game. It's not designed to be competitive. And in a sense, I can kind of self-handicap myself. If I want to give myself a challenge, I'll be like, right, I'm going to play Orcs and Goblins and I'm going to be rolling loads of animosity or whatever, and I'm going to make it harder for myself. So you can have some fun with that, even if it's not designed to be competitive. Just play it the way it's supposed to be.
I totally agree. And it's something that weirdly has been like a weirdly cool byproduct of having a compact in a way, because like we can go, we'll play, like everyone's got to bring a +5 next week, but I don't want, we're literally going to play lists that are fun. Go away and write a +5, like that's what we're all doing. And it's kind of like, that was a really cool way of getting everyone kind of in the same zone and going, we're playing for fun. And so I've bought this, or I've got no wizards. Oh, right, what? No wizards in my army today. I've got loads of warrior priests because this is like Sigmarite Coven or whatever. Whatever it is, that's what I'm doing today. So I think that's nice to. And there's loads of ways you can do that, but obviously we tend to do it that way because it's easy for us because we're so used to the pack that we use for everything. So, but I definitely think there's scope for that in any new game or even as a supplement. Like it doesn't have to be something that they do it with something again with Lord of the Rings. They have the sort of, I'm going to embarrass myself, can't think what it's called. It's like a gaming manual basically. It's about 20 quid. It's got 18 missions in it for singles. It's got 12 missions for doubles, and it's got points values and playing surface size. It's a match play guide. That's what it's called.
Okay.
And it's for playing games at events, basically.
Right.
And you buy it and you go to an event and they'll just say, we're playing this mission from page 27 of the match play guide. And that is so easy to produce for anyone. It's almost like it's an event pack, basically, but it's one that you can take everywhere. So I do think that's
exactly what you need. And when this old world comes out, if Games Workshop don't do that, you're going to do it, or someone else is going to do it.
Look, there's no doubt in my mind that we will produce an event pack of some description. Whether it changes the fundamentals of the game in any way, whether it imposes a comp or whatever, I don't know, because we'll do what we think is going to create the best environment and event. But ultimately, like, of course, people will do that. If it might be that, I mean, like in its earliest forms, we tried events where I tried other like event packs as well, like other styles of event pack as well. And it would be like, we're using the rulebook missions, but we're not using this one. Or like we play Watch Hill at our events instead of Watchtower. It's based on the Watchtower scenario, but it's got some changes to make it a bit more accessible for everyone and every type of army to play. That's not a groundbreaking change, but it's the sort of thing that you might look and say, well, actually, there's 6 missions in the book, but 3 of them really limit this. But if you did this, they wouldn't. So it might be that we do that. It might be that this is all kind of been thought of and done. But I think it's just about making a fantastic experience for people that want to go to events. And for me, I think that's a big positive for Games Workshop as well. Like ultimately, like if you've got events like your one in London that we came to, or like the ones that we run, that want to be positive about your product, it's, you know what I mean? Like, that's a no-brainer. Like we've put some FAQs in the pack to solve things that have been issues at previous events. That's not a negative. That's a positive thing, because we're doing that because we want to play this awesome game. We want to enjoy Warhammer,
And if Games Workshop run their events, that doesn't stop other people from running their own events, and they both help each other.
No, and I actually think that like modern Games Workshop is really collaborative in that way anyway. Like I think they, like if you look at the way they are with the feedback they take on from independent events now and the changes they make, I think they're really good at that now. So
I know they're a lot more liberal in terms of bringing non-Games Workshop models, aren't they?
Like, I couldn't speak to that, if I'm honest. And that's really because I've always gone to events of Warhammer World and stuff. I generally just buy the Games Workshop models. I've always done it, so I couldn't sort of speak to much experience of that. But I'm certain that they definitely take on board now the feedback from big events. You know, if you've got like an 80 player GT and you say, and you send them an email, or, you know, you say to them afterwards, by the way, this came up and it was a real issue, they fix it.
Hmm.
And I think that's awesome. I think that's a really positive thing, because that interaction, like with the community, that will pay dividends for the quality of the game for everyone anyway. So, you know, everyone benefits. More people buy more models because the game is in a positive, healthy place. That's good for Games Workshop, and more people go to events and have a great time, which is good for the people that do Games Workshop games. So
yeah,
like I say, I'm just excited, Simon. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I'm excited about saying no. I've done some high elves for the first time in forever.
Yeah.
And done models that I'm like, I just want to paint these models because they're cool.
But you're not putting them on 25mm bases, are you? You don't have to answer that.
Yeah, I've got some models on 25mm bases, so I'm gonna try and we're gonna have a look at doing some pictures and stuff when I got some stuff finished. But yeah, I've put some stuff on 25mm bases. It's not like I'm short of a collection. That's the thing. So I'm like, why am I worrying? Like, if I've got them on 25s and I want to put them on a different size later, I can.
Yeah.
But it's been good for me to just, it's been an enthusiastic thing. It's been like, I want to do this. Like, let's get some figures of that. It's new, it's different. Let's see what they look like on that.
Oh yeah, I won't be doing that personally, but I totally understand why people are doing that. I mean, my models are all from the 1980s and 90s anyway, so it's like I'm putting them on old bases. But
I think there'll be loads of solutions anyway. I've already seen like people printing like spacers and expanders, not just, I know people talked about these movement trays with the spaces, but I've even seen individual ones for each base.
Oh right, yeah.
And you can just drop your base into it and put a bit of blue tack in the bottom or a magnet.
Yeah.
And so it's gonna, like, that flexibility will exist, and people can do what they want to do with it. So,
and by the sound of this release that they've had, the base to base contact is less important anyway. So
it's definitely going to be interesting, because I've had a few people sort of, you know, it's a hot topic right now, isn't it? Like, the gaming club, people chatting and being like, well, what's the point in changing the base size if base to base contact has less of an impact?
So
you're like, that's an interesting idea, but I wonder if it will, if you know what I mean. I know there's a lot.
They've already told us why they're changing the base size. It's because of the models.
They're saying because of the ranking upper models.
Yeah.
I also think overall it's going to make like the smaller units still look the big spectacle as well.
Yeah.
Which I think is quite a nice thing.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I mean, I've actually, I think that the models will look better on the bigger bases. I'm not opposed to that aesthetically. It's just stuck in my ways, sort of thing.
Well, do you know what though? I wonder if you might get caught in the trap, Simon, of these guys I'm talking to that are saying, I'm going to do an army for it.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm not doing this. You know, I've always wanted to do that Beastman army, and I'm doing Beastman on the new size bases when they come out. And you're like, okay, let me know how that goes when it comes out.
Yeah.
You know, so I think there's probably going to be a bit of that happening, but yeah, I'll be really interesting to see if, like, what base size does. I know they've said that, like, it seems like everyone in the front row will fight, or everyone, you know, will fight regardless of positioning and stuff. So I'll be really interested to see exactly how that kind of works.
Yeah.
But I think what people have missed the touch with the base size is it will change maneuverability.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's going to be the big kingmaker. Is like, it's okay having a really big, fat, wide unit, but if that hole comes through your battle line, that's a huge area that you can now kind of be exploited on. So,
and it's harder to flank a very wide unit, isn't it? Because they've got a bigger.
And those are your counters, isn't it? It's like, if I lose the unit, it's a big gap, but it is harder to flank because it's got. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that looks and how that feels, and if formations do something, because obviously we're used to the horde formation, this wide frontage giving additional ranks to fight. But will different shapes do different things? I know, you know, like, you have like squares in some historical war games, and if you're in column, you get like more movement, or if you're in like square, you get better defense. So it could be.
Or cavalry charging the pikemen, they get.
Yeah, and that's a big one, isn't it? Like, I was saying to someone earlier today, I'd love to see spears. You know, spears like this historical weapon, like the preeminent weapon for 1,000 years, and they just don't feel like
they don't do
they
enough,
do
do
much.
they? Yeah.
I'd love to see, like, cavalry charging spearmen get killing blow for that turn.
Something
Like,
like that.
oh, that'd be terrifying. That'd
Yeah.
make spear really. I'd take spearmen all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that would, that's really exciting to.
There's an opportunity there, isn't there, to really capture people's
and,
imagination. Yeah.
And I think the crucial element is that, like something you said earlier that brings out is like, are you tempted to tweak? Are you tempted to change? I think the beauty of them having a supported game again, if you like, having Games Workshop's involvement, is if they hear the fans, and they seem to hear the fans more than they've ever heard them in the past, and I really like that. If they hear the fans saying things, and then some changes get made, that could be really exciting. If people are saying, do you know what, spears still feel really lackluster, and they go away and say, right, we're new supplement, the weapons of Warhammer. Take the weapons section from your main army book, from the main rule book. It's now replaced with the weapons of Warhammer. And actually, spears are really good now. Like, or spears have got a different role. Or that's awesome to me. Like that is something that we have a chance to really benefit from, which we've not been able to benefit from in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's been past changes that have been great. I mean, just adding like the having a shield giving you the 6-up parry. I mean, that was a great change.
I really liked that, and I played in earlier editions where it just added your armor save.
Yeah.
But what I liked is that it gave me an extra set of dice to throw.
Yeah.
And I know that people are like, but it slows it down. It does, and I'm like, yeah, all of that's fair. But I just think it's nice to feel like in your turn I'm rolling some dice, and any more opportunity for me to do that keeps me engaged in the game.
Yeah, that's true as well. Yeah, yeah.
So I quite like that as well.
Yeah.
And dwarves parry on a 5. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's real good stuff. So.
All right, James. Well, look, it's been a great conversation.
No, thank you for having me on, Simon. Honestly, it's been lovely to get on, and please accept my apologies for not being able to line a date up.
No, relax. Yeah,
very quickly for this, but it's been great.
Good. So, will I see you? You going to any events yourself then, as a competitor?
So I haven't got anything booked to the end of the year.
Okay. Yeah.
I know, like, Cardiff's in the air, but a bit like you, work is the concern for me at the moment. Just that's a really long period when that falls, and so and I've got a weird feeling it falls on my partner's birthday, but yeah, that's probably going to be a no, because I just think it's not going to work too well for me. So yeah, maybe not till the new year for me, but
you'll have to bring her along though. Make a weekend of it.
Sorry?
We're going to Cardiff. We're going to Cardiff, love, for the weekend.
I imagine that would be like filling the balloon with some sort of metal. But yeah, I maybe possibly New Year, but it just depends, because sometimes things pop up and it's quite short notice, but you think, well, I can get to that. So I'm always on the lookout. It will just be whether we can get there. But obviously, at the minute, the only thing I've got defo in is that I'll be at Araby in a couple of weeks' time running that.
Yeah.
And then after that, it will be a case of seeing what's available when I'm around. But yeah, definitely, I'd love to get out if I can.
And we're overdue a game as well, aren't we?
Absolutely, yeah. I need to experience the Wrath of Khorne. I'm telling you, we'll have to sort out getting you down for a Take the Crown.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. That'd be fun. Yeah,
we can film that and make it a bit of a laugh.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
All right, James.
No, thank you.
See you in a bit.
Take care.